This is episode 2011 of the Vibrant Living series. I'm Kimberly Henry, and this is Living the Good Life. Have you ever questioned what it means to be happy, or why it seems we have to try so hard? Today's guest has not only pondered those questions, but following a personal tragedy, he went on to research happiness in depth. Dr. J. Kumar is a renowned public speaker, thought leader, and academic. His expertise spans brain science, behavioral health, economics, politics, culture, and religion. Dr. Kumar holds a Ph.D. in cognitive science and religious studies. He also holds a master's degree from the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University in International Political Economy. Starting this year, Dr. J is the Director of Contemplative Practices and Well-Being at Chapman University, and he is the author of 2 books about happiness: Science of a Happy Brain, Thriving in the Age of Anger, Anxiety, and Addiction, and Brain, Body, and Being. Suffice it to say, he knows a lot about happiness, and he is here to share it with us now. Welcome to the program, Dr. J. Kumar, author, scholar, educator, and administrator right now, it sounds like. Dr. J, thanks for being with us.
Yes, thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you for this opportunity to be of service and value to your listeners.
Our pleasure. Absolutely. You and I had the opportunity to meet back in January, so about 6 months ago, and loved what I was hearing as you were sharing your book, The Science of a Happy Brain. And I just thought this would be a great topic for us to discuss right now. And little did I know that the world would change in such a way that it's even maybe more relevant.
Yeah, it was since when I saw you in January early this year, I was just about to start this new position as Director of Contemplative Practices and Well-Being at Chapman University and just had launched the book. And little did I realize that the world would turn somewhat pretty crazy just about 6 weeks later. But I really find that the value that this book brings, Science of a Happy Brain, it's really, I think, it reveals the stage that we're in right now in terms of where humanity is. I think we're all struggling, not just with health issues, with the coronavirus crisis, but as we speak right now, there's a lot of anger and I think, just rage, if you will. It's kind of happening around issues around social justice. And I really feel that the book speaks to a very basic understanding of who we are as people. And we'll talk about that today as well. But if I can just really share, although I have a strong academic qualifications background studying brain science and behavior, I really come from this place of personal experience and why it's so meaningful for me. As I reveal, the first thing that listeners will hopefully read when they have the book, Science of a Happy Brain, is my personal story, having lost my mother to suicide in my mid-20s. I say that all my academic qualifications, my resume, everything I was geared up for could not have prepared me for dealing with the aftermath of my own depression and anxiety and just navigating through this terrain. So mental health and mental, emotional, spiritual well-being is deeply important to me. This idea that we sometimes don't know where the journey and the road takes us, but I'm really pleased in some ways to know that out of crisis and out of confusion can come certainty and clarity and purpose and meaning. So I'm hopeful that this current crisis that all of us are experiencing can in some way help us reveal a deeper sense of how we can grow and become more resilient and actually become more strong from adversity and change. And so that's what I really hope our listeners can perhaps receive today.
Yes, absolutely. And your book, basically 10 chapters of kind of stepping us through the process of understanding how, the why, and then what we can do with it and do about it. But my first question for you is, are we meant to be happy? Is happiness something we are meant for? How do we know?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, Kimberly. And the answer to that is your brain evolved for not to be happy. Your brain evolved for survival. And I say that people say, well, that sounds kind of pessimistic. I said, no, it's actually not. So you think about this in the context of evolution, which is really my background is looking at how the brain evolved, looking at how it impacts our behavior. If you go back 10,000 years ago to our ancient, human Stone Age type, time of life was pretty brutal. All you wanted to do was just, make it one more day. And so this idea is that our brains really evolved to focus and to dwell on threats in our environment because monitoring or anticipating these threats was actually a mechanism or strategy for survival. The idea is that there's this concept called the brain's negativity bias, which for those people who don't know, it's the colorful way of maybe explaining it, is that your brain is like Velcro for negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain is like Teflon for positive thoughts. What does that mean? Negative thoughts or negative situations or potential negative threats have to register and be remembered more strongly than positive thoughts. So it's almost like about 10,000 years ago and you ate this, funny looking berry on the tree, you almost died from it. Your brain has to remember, okay, don't eat that berry again because I almost died. Or, that stranger who was coming up to me who I thought was going to be a friend actually turned out to be someone who, cocked me over the head with his club and stole all my food. Mm-hmm. So beware that person. So there's this idea that our human brain evolved in the context of survival to achieve three primary drives: the drive for seeking safety, security, and stability. Everything we're experiencing right now, whether it is the health crisis, whether it's the social crisis we're in right now, it's almost like all of these stressors, whether it's our concerns about our future, our health, our family, our finances, our career, our work, or where's society going right now, all these stressors would be major, issues to deal with on their own. But guess what? We are now in what I call the perfect stress storm. All these stressors are happening all at once, every area of our life. So is it any surprise that so many people that I advise or my students or people in my Chapman community or even listeners here, is it any surprise that all of us are experiencing a heightened sense of anxiety and stress and overwhelm? Precisely what your brain evolved to do for survival. There's good news. So the answer to the question is, did your brain evolve for happiness? The short answer is no, but the nicer answer is that we can now train your brain to experience the happiness, which is what the book Science of the Happy Brain is really about. It's the 10 lessons are adapted from the happiness course that I've been teaching for the past 9 years at Chapman University, which really exposes to people the strategies and the ways we could begin to perhaps, overcome what evolution wanted us to do, which is focus on the threats, focus on the bad, and forget the good. I'm saying with training and discipline, we can actually focus on the good. Maybe not forget the bad, we can tame the bad, if you will.
I have visions of laying in bed at night, and I know so many others do, where those negative thoughts are just spiraling through your brain. And I'm thinking as you're talking, I don't recall ever laying in bed and having positive thoughts uncontrollably spiraling through my brain. So wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to create here?
Absolutely. Like my mantra lately has been purple. I want people to know it's okay not to be okay. You've probably heard that phrase before, but it really is true. Yeah. Honor your feelings. I'm advising, so many people right now in terms of providing emotional, psychological, mental, and spiritual support and strategies for this, but in such a way that your feelings are real, honor what you're feeling. But my mantra has also been, if your outside world feels out of control, learn to control your inside world. Learn to control your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions. We don't always have the ability to control external situations, like the weather. You can't control the weather. You can't control right now what other people are behaving or acting. Well, what can you have control over? Well, you can control how you want to respond to these situations. So a very powerful, strategy we can perhaps share with our listeners today is, what can we do right now to learn how to be more adaptive and not reactive to the change and the uncertainty? Because our survival brain despises, more so than anything else, it despises uncertainty, change, because uncertainty and change are threats to your safety, security, and stability. A really great way, as you just kind of said, how do we maybe monitor, or what I say, how do we control these negative thoughts? Well, one really powerful way to do this, before you go to sleep, one thing you can do is perhaps remember, what are three positive, powerful things that I'm grateful for, or something that happened to me today that made me happy or smile. The more you can begin to remember the positive, it won't dispel the negative situations, but it'll help you put them into a greater framework and context. So the first strategy is this idea of comfort. Mm-hmm. Take comfort in what's going well in your life. Take comfort in remembering all the things you have going well for you. Perhaps you still have your family, you have a roof over your head, you have people, you have your health and well-being. Be grateful for these little things that we sometimes take for granted.
So important. I think if all of us can just stop and appreciate, and gratitude is such a big thing. We hear about that all of the time. Being grateful for the things that are going well, and somehow you attract more of what's going well. And I would assert that that's probably a mindset shift that allows you to see more of the happiness.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, Kimberly. We can go through these four strategies, and also I think listeners might also be delighted to hear. In addition to this book, Science of a Happy Brain, I just launched a whole new online happiness course, more so geared towards the business, corporate, and working world as well, because work is such an important aspect of our life, as many of us know. This online course is called Investing in Happiness. This whole idea of these strategies. So maybe we can talk about these other three strategies. The first strategy being comfort. Another way to maybe establish comfort, especially for right now, for those of us who are perhaps still working remotely or kind of navigating what these next steps are as we try to maybe transition back into, what would be considered normal life, is really begin to practice regularity and routine, have a schedule. So if you were getting up a certain time before you had to remote work, or if you, went to the gym a certain time, your kids were going to school a certain time, keep that up. What our survival brain just really finds comfort in is routine and regularity. So the more you can begin to cultivate that or promote routine regularity, that's one form of comfort as well. Obviously, another great way is diet, exercise, and sleep. Don't neglect that. But I think we'll talk about these strategies also in the context of not just our everyday life, but also in work. So if you want to take this idea of comfort and be put in work into the workplace environment or into perhaps your corporate world, what are things we can do to ensure everybody in the workplace or your work environment is a place that everyone feels comfortable in? What might that look like? One very important aspect is psychological safety and trust. Even if you're working from home, is your workplace comfortable? Can you make your workplace comfortable and maybe suitable so you feel that you're able to, think properly, you're able to work properly? This is really also very important, I think, for people who are returning back to work, especially if you are in HR or if you're someone who is an employer who is an organization. What can you do to ensure that psychological safety and trust is guaranteed? And one way to do this is honesty and communication. People need to feel they can voice their concerns.
Right. Now, this course that you created online through Genu Connect, and we will provide a link in our show notes. So don't worry about trying to find it. We will definitely make it easy for you to find. And Dr. J has given us a little bit of a discount code that we'll offer to you as well. And thank you for that.
Yes, most welcome.
I wanted to ask you, though, is the course designed for employees, employers, or both?
Everyone who works.
Okay.
How's that?
That's
so
perfect.
Yes, if you're an independent contractor, if you work from home, if you're a CEO, if you're an HR, if you are an employee, this online course is for anyone who has any form of profession, whatever that might be. So it's not just for people working in the corporate world, in the corporate office. It's for people who are entrepreneurs. It can apply to any employee. It can even apply if you're a working mom. We have to maybe think about work as not just being something where you go into an office. I find that work is whatever you do in the world that brings a sense of contribution, which is the next C, which is a nice segue. So think about work as, I say this in the Investing in Happiness course, if all you're receiving will work as a paycheck, you're being grossly underpaid. Of course, work is about income and we have to provide those financial means for our work. I want people to think about work as not just being something that provides the focus is on money, but the focus is also on meaning. Does my work give me a sense of purpose and meaning? And that might be a luxury for many of us. I know many of us just have to work because it is just a basic source of survival. I understand that. I'm not trying to ignore that possibility. But, for those of us who look at work and kind of see it as a drudgery or just kind of see it as a paycheck, maybe it's time we rethink about this. And this might even be true if you are in a position where you think your work is meaningless. And I'm going to say the contrary. Everyone's work provides some valuable contribution to society.
I think we've learned that now more than ever, just with the coronavirus and the shutdowns that we've had. The people that we thought were not necessarily the most important contributors to society have become the essential employees.
Right. So, so the mail delivery people who are stocking grocery shelves, the people at the cashier, the people who are driving in trucks, to haul produce around the country, people working in food industries, or people picking the fruit on the fields. All these people were somehow deemed to be, we have this ability maybe to stratify, people in professions, and which is unfortunate. But I think we're now recognizing, this is where I think contribution comes into play in the workplace. Everyone has a function and a role to play for an organization where you translate into society to succeed. Same can be true for a family. Think about your family as an organizational unit. Every member of that family, even if it's a baby, or even if it's a young child, every individual in that family provides some form of contribution to the greater whole. So putting this in the terms of the context of work, I know you said, in the current society right now with the coronavirus crisis, we now are recognizing how these individuals who we somehow deem to be non-essential are really essential right now. Right. So the same thing is true in the corporate world. It doesn't matter if you're the mail person or if you are the assistant to the CEO or the CEO, herself or himself. It's really important for everyone to know in the workplace. Every single person in that organizational unit provides a tremendous contribution and value to the overall mission, success, and the prosperity and improving the bottom line, if you will, of the organization. So it's very important for employers, but also for everyone who's working in the corporate world to recognize and to realize the fact that contribution is a very important component, and to recognize the fundamental need all of us need to find a sense of value, belonging, and engagement. And more so than anything else, and this is interesting, they found this out in a lot of studies, in the corporate world, more people would rather, in addition to maybe having, a bonus or a paycheck, what they really crave more is recognition. And the sense of we belong. The sense of belonging is so key. And I think that's a really important piece for which the segue to the next thing, which is connection.
Right. Connection. Yes.
So all these things kind of segue together. So
you've done this before, have you?
Yes, I have. So the third C is connection. Something I think many of our listeners will be interested to find. I reveal this very, very strongly in the book, Science of a Happy Brain, and also in the online course, Investing in Happiness. Let's kind of take this back to the idea of our Stone Age time period in our human history. And you're all by yourself. You're all by yourself, and you're cold, you're hungry, you're tired. All you want is just a warm, safe place to stay, some food, the feeling of safety, security, and stability. Now, ask yourself, would your chances for survival increase if you had one other able-bodied person with you that you can trust? Well, the answer is yes, of course. So we forget to understand this. What is it that made us humans the top species on the planet? If you think about it in the context of, again, adaptation or evolution, we humans are not the strongest of animals. We're not the fastest, we're not the tallest, we can't breathe underwater naturally, we can't fly, cut off our limbs, the limbs don't regenerate like some species do. So what is it that made us humans the alpha apex species of the planet? And that one winning strategy was the recognition that in order to survive, we had to socialize. To socialize is to survive, to thrive is to thrive. The
Right.
winning strategy for early humans to become the top species on the planet was recognizing the ability to form into complex social networks. And the term was complex social networks. Of course, other species do this, like dogs and maybe other animals as well. But the idea is complex social structures.
And we
And
have done that in spades for sure. We've got just a moment left. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's also important, I think, that fourth C, compassion. And then I have one final question for you after we hear just a little bit on compassion.
Yeah. So, I'm finding right now that compassion is needed more so right now than I think more so all the other four C's at the moment.
Yeah.
Having compassion and recognizing the struggles and strife and pain of others is so key and so important. Compassion is the medicine we need in the world today to heal, especially what's happening with the struggles and the call to social justice for disenfranchised or marginalized members of our society right now. And there's also a very deep understanding that without compassion, without empathy, again, it ties into the segue about the last of connection. When Charles Darwin, we kind of think about as the struggle for survival, adaptation, all that kind of, et cetera, all those phrases. In his work, one of which is called The Descent of Man, we kind of had this idea that his famous phrase is, struggle, survival. But what's interesting, that term, struggle for survival, was only mentioned, I think, 2 or 3 times. But there was one word that was mentioned more so than any other word in his work, and that word was love.
Mm.
And so we tend to forget our brains are far more wired for empathy, compassion, altruism, kindness, and generosity more so than we are for struggle and strife. And we're seeing it right now. We know this to be true in times of crisis, especially whether it's the corona crisis or the societal social crisis we're in right now. We tend to find what I call the better angel of our nature do come out. In times of crisis, we do actually do the right thing. And the last thing I'll say is your brain is wired for this. There are mechanisms in the brain, which the book Science of the Happy Brain talks about. There are numerous systems in the brain that advance these pro-social behaviors. And so these 4 fundamental strategies or drives, comfort, contribution, connection, and compassion. If we begin to work on these, as I like to say, happiness is not a promise, happiness is a practice. We have to practice because, as we said earlier in the start of the show, your brain is geared more towards survival than it is towards happiness. So if we can begin to practice these strategies of comfort, contribution, connection, and compassion, this does something remarkable. It begins to rewire our brain so we become more happy. And so, as I like to say, happy brains make happy people make a happy world. It all starts with you. So every single person has the ability to create more harmony and happiness and healing in the world, which is much needed today.
Absolutely. One last question for you. In 25 words or less, if you could tell someone a tip to implement today to increase their happiness, what would that one first step be?
Yes. So I would suggest looking out for others, compassion, empathy, and kindness. Do one kind act today, which could be something as smiling to a stranger on the street, saying thank you to the cashier at the grocery store, letting someone into your lane as you're driving. These acts of kindness become contagious. So do at least one random act of kindness today. It'll not make the other person happy. Brain science research shows it'll make your brain happy.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing just a little bit of the knowledge that you've accrued and that you've written about, and loving the course. I myself am taking your course at Gen Connect U, and I've read the book. It correlates very nicely, but what I love is the short little videos and the exercises in between. Allows me to work at my own pace. It's just a great way to further this message of comfort, contribution, connection, and compassion, and breed happiness in my surroundings. So highly encourage folks to jump on board and learn a little bit more from Dr. J. Kumar. Dr. J, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Vibrant Living series. It's always a pleasure to connect with you here and in our Facebook community. Search for Living the Good Life community and join the conversation. Our goal is to provide tips and conversations around ways to embrace the goodness of life and take a big, juicy bite out of it. Food for the soul and the funny bone. Learn to give more time to yourself, become a better friend, lead an amazing life, and how to tell the best joke at the party. I'm Kimberly Henry, and this is Living the Good Life.